Welcome to Science for Sleep. If you're new here, this channel is a place where we explore the biggest questions in science, physics, and existence itself, slowly and thoughtfully. These are ideas meant to be listened to over time, without rush, allowing curiosity to stay awake while the rest of the world grows quiet. Tonight, we're exploring one of the deepest questions humans have ever asked. What defines nothingness? Sounds simple at first. Nothing. The absence of everything. But the moment we try to define it, nothingness begins to fall apart. Because the idea of nothing is one of the most unstable concepts the human mind has ever encountered. To understand nothingness, we first need to understand how the brain handles existence at all. The human mind evolved to recognize things. Objects, movement, change, patterns. Our perception is built entirely around detecting something rather than nothing. We notice light because it contrasts with darkness. We hear sound because it interrupts silence. We feel temperature because it differs from our body. Nothingness, by contrast, has no contrast. It has no boundaries, no features, no signals. And yet, we talk about it constantly. Empty space, the void, before the universe, after everything ends. But the moment we describe nothing, we've already turned it into something. This is the first paradox of nothingness. Nothingness cannot be observed directly. The instant you observe it, it becomes something. So how does science approach an idea that cannot be measured, detected, or directly experienced? By circling it carefully. In physics, what we often call nothing is not actually nothing. Take empty space. For centuries, people imagined space as a vast, silent emptiness, a stage where matter exists but which itself is nothing at all. Modern physics shattered that idea. What we call empty space is filled with activity. Quantum fields exist everywhere. Particles appear and disappear. Energy fluctuates. Even the most perfect vacuum we can create still contains measurable energy. So from a physical standpoint, true nothingness does not appear to exist inside our universe. There is always something. Fields, potential, structure. This leads to an uncomfortable question. If there is always something, was there ever truly nothing? To explore this, we need to go back to the beginning of time. The Big Bang is often misunderstood. It was not an explosion into empty space. It was the expansion of space itself. Before the Big Bang, according to our current models, space and time as we know them did not exist. Which raises the question, what existed before existence? The honest scientific answer is unsettling. We don't know. And more importantly, we may never know. Because before requires time. And time itself began with the universe. Asking what came before time may be like asking what is north of the North Pole. The question may not be meaningful, but the human mind resists this. We instinctively imagine a blank void before the universe, a cosmic nothing. But physics suggests there may never have been absolute nothingness. Some theories propose that the universe emerged from a quantum vacuum. But again, a quantum vacuum is not nothing. It is a state governed by laws, by equations, by energy. Others suggest the universe arose from a fluctuation in a timeless quantum field. Still not nothing, just a different kind of something. This leads to a profound possibility. Nothingness may not be a physical state at all. It may be a conceptual boundary, a limit of understanding rather than a real condition. Philosophers have struggled with this for thousands of years. Ancient Greek thinkers argued about whether nothingness could even exist. Parmenides claimed that nothing comes from nothing. If something exists now, something must have always existed. To him, nothingness was impossible. Others disagreed. They imagined voids where atoms moved, spaces where being gave way to non-being. In Eastern philosophy, the concept of nothingness took a very different shape. In Taoism and Buddhism, nothingness is not absence. It is openness. Emptiness is not lack, but potential. A cup is useful because it is empty. A room is functional because it has space. In this view, nothingness is not the opposite of existence. It is the condition that allows existence to occur. This interpretation aligns strangely well with modern physics. Empty space is not dead. It is active, structured, full of possibility. The vacuum is not nothing. It is the lowest energy state of something. This suggests that absolute nothingness may be unstable. If true nothing ever existed, it might immediately give rise to something. This idea has fueled both scientific theories and conspiracies. One theory proposes that universes spontaneously emerge because nothingness cannot remain nothing. That existence is inevitable. That nothing is a state that collapses into something. This idea is controversial. It blurs the line between physics and philosophy, but it highlights an uncomfortable truth. We have no evidence that true nothingness can persist. Everywhere we look, we find structure. Even absence has rules. This brings us to the conspiracies. Some believe nothingness is hidden from us, that the universe is not fundamental, that it is built on a deeper layer of reality we cannot perceive. In this view, what we call nothingness is actually something concealed, a substrate, a simulation framework, a computational background. These ideas often overlap with simulation theory. If reality is simulated, then empty space may not be nothing at all. It may be processing capacity, memory, unrendered data. In such theories, nothingness is an illusion created by limits of perception. There is always something underneath. Others believe nothingness exists beyond the universe, that outside our cosmic bubble is absolute void. No space, no time, no laws. But this idea faces a problem. If there is no space, what does outside mean? If there is no time, how does change occur? We quickly reach the edge of language. Words fail here. Our brains evolved inside something. We have no intuitive grasp of true nothing, which raises a deeper possibility. Nothingness may not be a feature of reality. It may be a feature of human thought, a placeholder for ignorance, a word we use when explanation ends. When we say nothing, we often mean something we do not understand. Dark matter was once nothing. Dark energy was once nothing. Before atoms, chemistry had nothing. Before galaxies, the sky was nothing. Again and again, nothingness has been replaced by structure. But this does not mean the question is meaningless. It means the question is foundational. What defines nothingness may ultimately define existence itself. Because if we can understand what nothing is, we understand why there is something. And that may be the deepest scientific question of all. To continue, we need to look at a place where nothingness appears to exist more cleanly than in physics. Mathematics. In mathematics, nothingness seems precise. The number zero, an empty set, a null value. At first glance, these appear to be pure representations of nothing. But even here, nothingness is not what it seems. Zero is not nothing. Zero is a number. It has properties. It behaves according to rules. It interacts with other numbers. Zero can be added, subtracted, multiplied. It plays a critical role in structure. Without zero, mathematics collapses. The empty set, often written as a set containing nothing, is still something. It is a defined object. It exists within a system. It has properties. In fact, the empty set is one of the most fundamental building blocks of mathematics. Entire number systems can be constructed from it. So even in the most abstract domain humans have created, nothingness is never truly empty. It is formalized, contained, structured. This suggests a recurring theme. Whenever we try to represent nothing, we turn it into something. A symbol, a concept, a boundary. True nothingness resists representation. This leads to a deeper philosophical question. Is nothingness even logically coherent? Some philosophers argue that it is not. They claim that the idea of nothingness contains a contradiction. To exist as a concept, it must be something. To be defined, it must have properties. If nothingness has properties, it is not nothing. This creates a loop. Nothingness cannot exist without being something. And yet, we continue to ask about it. Why? Because the question is not really about nothing. It is about origins, beginnings, endings. We ask about nothingness when we want to know where things come from, and where they go when they disappear. In physics, disappearance is never absolute. Matter turns into energy. Energy transforms. Information persists. Even black holes, once thought to erase everything, appear to preserve information in subtle ways. Hawking radiation, entropy accounting, quantum correlations. Nothing is ever truly lost. This challenges the idea that the universe could end in nothingness. Even in the far future, when stars burn out and galaxies drift apart, something remains. Particles, fields, vacuum energy. Heat death is not nothingness. It is a state of maximum entropy. A universe full of something but with no usable energy. Still not nothing. Some theories go further. They suggest that even if our universe fades into a cold, diffuse state, it could give rise to new universes. Quantum fluctuations, vacuum decay, cosmic recycling. In these models, nothingness is never reached. The universe transitions endlessly between forms. Existence feeds existence. This idea has inspired speculative theories that nothingness is impossible, that existence is necessary, that there must always be something. If this is true, then the question changes. Instead of asking why there is something rather than nothing, we ask whether nothingness is even allowed by the rules of reality. Some physicists argue that the laws of physics require existence, that given the mathematical structure of reality, something must exist. Others disagree. They argue that laws themselves require explanation. Why these laws? Why this structure? Why not nothing at all? This is where science reaches its limit. Because science assumes existence. It assumes laws. It cannot explain why there are laws instead of none. This boundary is where philosophy begins, and where theology for some enters. Some religious traditions define nothingness as absence of divine presence. Others define creation as emergence from nothing, creation ex nihilo. But even here, nothingness is defined relative to something. A creator, a cause. Modern cosmology complicates this. If time began with the universe, creation may not have been an event. It may have been a condition, not a moment, but a boundary. Nothingness may not have preceded existence. It may simply be a word we use to describe the absence of our models. This brings us to consciousness, because nothingness may not exist objectively at all. It may exist only subjectively. Think about what nothing feels like. We imagine darkness, silence, emptiness. But darkness is the absence of light. Silence is the absence of sound. Emptiness is the absence of objects. All of these are still experiences. They are still something. True nothingness would not be experienced at all. No perception, no awareness, no memory, which means no one could ever experience nothingness. The moment awareness is present, nothingness disappears. This leads to a startling conclusion. Nothingness cannot be experienced. It can only be imagined. And imagination itself is something. This suggests that nothingness may be inaccessible not just physically, but cognitively. Our minds cannot grasp it directly. We can only circle it with symbols and metaphors. This may explain why nothingness feels unsettling. It resists comprehension. It offers no reference point, no contrast, no anchor. The brain evolved to navigate something, not absence. This cognitive limitation has fueled centuries of speculation. Some believe that consciousness itself emerges from nothing, that the brain produces awareness from non-conscious matter. But even here, the components are something. Neurons, electrochemical signals, information processing. There is no clear jump from nothing to something, only transformation. Others propose that consciousness is fundamental, that awareness is the base layer of reality. If this is true, then nothingness truly does not exist. There is always awareness, even if there is nothing to be aware of. This is speculative. but it reflects a deep intuition shared across cultures. That emptiness is not absence. It is presence without form. In this view, nothingness is a misunderstanding, a mislabeling of potential. The void is not empty. It is undefined. This aligns with modern physics in an unexpected way. Quantum fields exist everywhere, even in the vacuum, even in the absence of particles. This vacuum is restless, fluctuating, alive with probability. Nothingness, it seems, is not stable. Which brings us back to the original question. What defines nothingness? So far, every attempt to define it has failed. Physics replaces it with fields. Mathematics replaces it with symbols. Philosophy dissolves it into contradiction. Consciousness cannot experience it. This suggests a radical possibility. Nothingness is not a thing to be defined. It is a limit, the edge of language, the boundary of explanation, a marker where understanding ends. But boundaries are important. They define what lies within. Nothingness may define existence by contrast, by being the idea that shows us what existence is not, and that may be its only role. To continue, we need to push the idea of nothingness to its absolute extreme. Not empty space, not vacuum, not silence, but true nothing. No space, no time, no laws, no information, no potential. Absolute nothingness. This is the version people usually mean when they ask the question. And it is the version that may be impossible. To see why, we need to ask a strange question. What would it take for nothingness to exist? If nothingness existed, it would have to be stable. It would have to persist. But persistence requires time. If there is no time, nothingness cannot last. If it cannot last, it cannot exist as a state. Existence itself implies duration. So absolute nothingness may not be compatible with existence at all. This creates a paradox. Nothingness cannot exist, because to exist would require something. This leads some philosophers to argue that nothingness is not a state of reality. It is a linguistic construction. A word describing the absence of objects within an already existing framework. When we remove all objects from space, we are still left with space. When we remove all energy, we are still left with fields. When we remove all laws, we are still left with logic. And if we try to remove logic itself, we lose the ability to describe anything at all. This is where the idea of nothingness collapses entirely. If logic does not exist, then even the statement, "nothing exists," is meaningless. It cannot be true or false. It cannot be stated. This suggests that nothingness cannot be coherently defined. It is self-defeating. Yet, science continues to explore models that come close. One such idea is vacuum decay. In some theories, our universe exists in a metastable state, a false vacuum, a region of space governed by specific laws. If that vacuum decays, a bubble of lower energy vacuum could form. Inside that bubble, the laws of physics would be different, possibly hostile to matter. Atoms would not exist. Particles might not exist. This has been described incorrectly as the universe collapsing into nothing. But even this is not nothing. It is a different something. Different laws, different structure, different fields, still existence. Another idea involves the ultimate fate of the universe. Could everything eventually disappear? Protons decay. Black holes evaporate. Energy spreads out. At the end of time, what remains? According to current models, the universe approaches a thin, cold state. Particles drifting in near-perfect emptiness. Time stretches. Events become rare. But even here, something exists. Vacuum energy. Quantum fluctuations. Space-time itself. Even if space-time becomes infinitely large and empty, it is still there. So the universe never reaches nothingness. It approaches emptiness asymptotically, always getting closer, never arriving. This suggests that nothingness is not a destination. It is a limit that cannot be reached. Much like absolute zero temperature. We can approach it. We can never attain it. This analogy is powerful. Absolute zero is defined, but unreachable. Nothingness may be similar, defined conceptually, unreachable physically. This has implications for cosmology. Some models propose that universes are eternal, either cycling, branching, or spawning new universes. In these models, nothingness never appears. Existence is the default. This idea unsettles people. It removes the comfort of a beginning, a clean start, a moment where something came from nothing. Instead, it suggests an infinite regress, or a self-contained system with no origin. This clashes with human intuition. We like stories, beginnings, origins. Nothingness is often used as a narrative device, a blank page before creation. But reality may not work like a story. It may not need a beginning, which leads to a radical conclusion. The question, why is there something rather than nothing, may be ill-posed. Because nothing may never have been an option. Existence may be necessary, not by intention, but by structure. This idea is deeply unsettling. It removes mystery in one sense, but deepens it in another. If existence is necessary, then reality is self-explaining. It does not require a cause. It simply is. This idea appears in philosophy as necessary being. In physics, it appears as mathematical inevitability. Some physicists argue that the universe exists because it is mathematically consistent, that all consistent structures exist. This is controversial, but it suggests that nothingness is excluded by logic. If a structure is possible, it exists. Nothingness is not a structure, therefore it cannot exist. This view reframes nothingness as the only impossible thing. Everything else is allowed. Even the universe, even consciousness, even time. Nothingness alone is forbidden. This view is speculative, but it aligns with a pattern we keep seeing. Everywhere we look, there is something, even where we expect absence, which raises a final question. Why does nothingness feel so real to us? Why do we intuitively believe in it? Because our experience is local. We experience absence. We experience loss. We experience emptiness. When a room is empty, we call it nothing. When a sound stops, we call it silence. When a person is gone, we call it absence. But these are relative. They exist within a framework. They are not absolute. Nothingness, as we imagine it, is an extrapolation, a mental extreme. The brain takes local absence and extends it infinitely. This is a cognitive illusion, useful, but misleading. Nothingness may be an idea the brain invents to understand contrast, not a feature of reality, which leads to a subtle but profound conclusion. Nothingness may not define reality. Reality defines nothingness. Nothingness is the shadow cast by existence. Remove existence, and there is nothing left to cast the shadow. So nothingness disappears. In that sense, nothingness depends on something, not the other way around. To bring everything together, we need to step back from physics and philosophy for a moment and look at the question the way humans have always approached it. Quietly, personally. Because nothingness is not just a scientific question. It is an emotional one. When people ask about nothingness, they are often asking something else. What happens when everything ends? What happens when I am gone? What happens when awareness stops? These questions are never far beneath the surface. And this is where nothingness becomes most powerful. Not as a physical state, but as an idea. The fear of nothingness has shaped human culture. It appears in myths of the void, in creation stories, in religious visions of chaos before order. But across cultures, nothingness is rarely portrayed as stable. It is either transformed, filled, ordered, or avoided entirely. Creation myths often begin with chaos, not nothing. A formless sea, a dark abyss, a silent potential. Again and again, nothingness is softened, made into something vague rather than absolute. This may reflect a deep intuition that true nothingness is not survivable even as a thought. The mind instinctively replaces it, which brings us to consciousness itself. When you sleep without dreaming, what do you experience? Nothing. Or so it seems. But from the inside, there is no experience of nothing. There is simply no experience. Time passes without awareness, and then awareness returns. From the subjective perspective, there is no gap, no felt nothingness, just discontinuity. This is important. It shows that nothingness is not experienced as a state. It is experienced as absence of memory. The brain turns off recording, but something is still happening. Cells are active. Processes continue. The body persists. Nothingness, again, is not present, only unremembered. This suggests that what we call nothingness may often be a failure of access, not a state of reality. When we say there was nothing, we often mean we were not aware. This applies at cosmic scales too. Before the universe, we say there was nothing. But this may simply mean there was no frame of reference, no observer, no memory. Nothingness may be the absence of description, not the absence of existence. This reframing changes everything. It suggests that the universe did not emerge from nothing. It emerged from beyond our ability to describe, which is a very different claim. This idea appears in physics when equations break down. Singularities, Planck scales, quantum gravity. At these boundaries, our models stop working. We say nothing is known. But that does not mean nothing exists. It means knowledge ends. And that may be the true definition of nothingness. Nothingness is the edge of explanation, the place where models fail, the boundary where language collapses. In this sense, nothingness is not empty. It is undefined. And undefined does not mean absent. It means unresolved. This aligns with how science progresses. What was once nothing becomes something once understanding improves. Space was nothing. Then it was ether. Then it was geometry. Then it was dynamic spacetime. The vacuum was nothing. Then it was empty. Then it was active. Nothingness keeps retreating. It is never found. Which leads to a final, subtle conclusion. Nothingness may not be part of reality at all. It may be a mental construct created by finite minds trying to grasp infinity. We imagine nothing because we cannot imagine everything. We imagine emptiness because fullness overwhelms us. Nothingness becomes a placeholder, a simplifying fiction. This does not make the question meaningless. It makes it revealing. Asking about nothingness reveals how the mind works, how it handles limits, how it responds to uncertainty, how it fills gaps. And this may be the deepest lesson of all. The universe does not need nothingness, but humans do. We need it as contrast, as boundary, as concept. It helps us define presence, meaning, existence. Without the idea of nothing, something would be undefined. So what defines nothingness? Nothingness is defined by absence of definition. It is defined by the limits of knowledge. It is defined by the edges of perception. It is defined by the failure of models. It is not a thing. It is a boundary. And boundaries are not places. They are relationships. Nothingness marks where understanding stops, where certainty ends, where curiosity begins. And that may be why the question endures. Not because nothingness is out there waiting to be found, but because it marks the horizon of what we know. And horizons are meant to be approached, not reached. In the quiet hours, when the mind slows and questions expand, nothingness feels close. But what we are really sensing is not emptiness. It is depth. The depth of a universe that continues to exist, even where our explanations fall silent. And in that silence, something remains. Curiosity, awareness, existence itself. And that, perhaps, is the final answer. Not that nothingness defines reality, but that reality defines the absence we call nothing. And it does so completely, without leaving any true void behind. If nothingness cannot exist as a physical state, and cannot be experienced as a mental state, then why does the idea remain so compelling? The answer may be that nothingness is not about what exists. It is about what does not change. When everything is removed from a thought experiment, what remains is not emptiness but invariance, something that does not depend on objects, events, or time. In physics, this idea appears as symmetry, invariance under transformation. When laws remain the same even as conditions change, symmetry is not nothing, but it is what remains when everything else is stripped away. In mathematics, when values disappear, structure remains. Relationships remain. Logic remains. Again, not nothing, but something more fundamental than objects. In consciousness, when thoughts fade, awareness remains. Not content, not identity, just the fact of experience. This has led some philosophers and neuroscientists to suggest something subtle, that what we call nothingness is actually the most minimal form of something, the simplest possible state. Not absence, but irreducibility. This reframes the entire question. Instead of asking what defines nothingness, we ask what cannot be removed, what remains when everything else is gone. Physics removes matter and finds fields, removes fields and finds laws, removes laws and finds mathematics, removes mathematics and finds logical consistency. Consciousness removes thoughts and finds awareness, removes identity and finds presence, removes memory and finds immediacy. At no point do we find nothing. We find something simpler. This suggests that reality may be layered, and nothingness is what we call the bottom layer, even when it still contains structure. The mistake may be assuming there is a bottom at all. Reality may not terminate in nothingness. It may terminate in simplicity, or it may not terminate at all. This aligns with a final, quiet possibility, that the universe does not rest on nothing. It rests on itself, self-consistent, self-contained, without external reference. In such a universe, nothingness is unnecessary. There is no outside, no before, no absolute absence, only transitions between forms. And this brings us back to the human experience. When people fear nothingness, they are often fearing discontinuity, the idea that everything meaningful could simply stop. But physics suggests continuity is deeper than form. Forms change, structures dissolve, patterns fade, but something continues. Not necessarily in a way that preserves identity or memory, but in a way that preserves existence. This does not answer every emotional question. Science is not designed to do that, but it does offer perspective. It suggests that the universe is not fragile. It does not blink out. It does not fall into emptiness. It transforms, endlessly, quietly, which makes the idea of nothingness feel less like a destination, and more like a misunderstanding. A word we invented to describe the edge of our maps. And maps are not territory. They end where exploration begins. So when we ask what defines nothingness, the most accurate answer may be this. Nothingness is defined by the limits of human description, by the point where questions outpace language, by the silence that follows explanation. And silence is not nothing. It is simply the absence of noise. Something is still there, waiting, unchanged by our understanding. Whether we call it reality, existence, awareness, or simply what is. And in that sense, nothingness never truly arrives. It only appears when we stop talking, when we stop measuring, when we stop naming. And even then, something remains. Because existence does not require our attention. It does not require our definitions. It does not require contrast. It simply continues, quietly, completely, and without ever becoming nothing at all.